Winston Churchill once said, "My best impromptu speeches I spend the longest time preparing for." and that's more about understanding that, there's moments and you have to prepare for them. And, and whilst people just think, he just jumped up there and he said that, very rarely does that ever happen. It might, you might have some success at some stage and you'll jump up there and someone will put a microphone in front of you, but, you should have always dreamt about that success, and what's it look like. And the more vivid the vision is about what it's going to look like, what it's going to feel like, and then, and the more you think about that, then you start to add layers to it. So I'm a bit of a believer in that you should always be prepared for something. And like for every 1 minute you speak, you should probably spend 4 or 5 minutes in preparation. So if you're giving a half-hour talk, it's probably 2 or 3 hours worth of preparation that goes into it.
Welcome to the Get Invested podcast, where we share great conversations with experts from all walks of life to uncover their secret know-how and where they invest their time, their skills and their money, and the benefits that this has created. You see, the truth is that everyone invests. Every minute of every day, we're investing our time, our skills, our energy and our money in something. Some of us are investing consciously, some unconsciously, sometimes for good, sometimes for bad, and sometimes for no impact. Get Invested will help you to start living by design, not by default. I'm going to help you to make it happen, not let it happen. You'll hear the top tips on how you can live with conscious intent so that you can live more, work less, and leave a living legacy by investing now. Listen to the show to discover the top tips on how to get started, make the most of your investment journey, and ultimately to be living your dream, not someone else's. More episodes can be found on iTunes or at bushymartin.com.au/get invested. Thanks for listening, and now let's get invested. Welcome, freedom fighters. I just love my job. There are days when I just pinch myself when this podcast gives me the rare opportunity to spend time with my heroes and successful quality people from all walks of life with a free license to ask them anything. It just doesn't get much better than this, and today's guest is right up there. Now, one of the questions I'm constantly searching for in this podcast is answers on things like this. What does it take to achieve real, long-lasting and sustainable success? Now, we hear a lot in the media about the latest overnight sensation, but most of them end up being flash in the pans or one-hit wonders enjoying their 5 seconds of fame. But to me, truly successful people are those very humble few that are respected by many for making a major and leading contribution to a field of endeavour over many years. So, how do the humble handful achieve this enduring success over the long haul? Do you just have to be born smarter, stronger, bigger and faster? Or is it just luck? Or are there key values, beliefs, attitudes and behaviours that you can adopt that will help you to succeed if you're prepared to put in the hard work, regardless of who you are? Well, today's guest is the perfect person to discuss this and many more of the pros and cons of real versus perceived success. Mark Bicks Bickley remains a humble hero. He's a country boy from the regional town of Port Pirie in South Aussie's mid-north, who went on to play in the first Adelaide Crows football side when they entered the Australian Football League competition back in the early 90s. Now, Bick's quietly conscientious and supportive approach led to his captaincy, winning 2 consecutive premierships over nearly 300 games during his long 13-year career. A feat rarely achieved in the history of the game, which contributed to his recognition in the Australian Football Hall of Fame. But his success didn't end here. In fact, this was only the beginning. Since then, he's enjoyed a long career in the media, both on TV and now on radio. And he's also owned and run a retail business. He was the chairman of SA Great, the premium collective to promote the merits of the best-kept secret in the country, which is good old South Australia. He's also enjoyed a stint back in the coaching chair of his beloved Adelaide Crows. Now, I've been quite an admirer of Bicks for many years, not only for his obvious achievements, but more for the way he goes about everything he does. So if you're looking for answers on how to go from good to great, along with the highs and the lows associated with elite performance in sport, in business, and in life in general, then you're really going to enjoy this engaging chat with his living legend, Mark Bickley.
Welcome, Freedom Fighters. It's Bushy Martin, and today we've got an absolute treat. We're talking to someone who I've had immense respect and admiration for a long time, not only for the successes that he's achieved in his sporting career and his media career, but more importantly, how he's gone about it, the perseverance, the discipline, the dedication that's gone into it. So I'm really honoured to be able to spend some time with Mark Bickley. Welcome aboard, Mark.
Bushy, welcome. Thank you very much.
Thanks, mate. Look, you're very well known here in good old Adelaide and South Australia. But there are listeners across the globe that'll be tuning in. So keen for you to tell us who you are, what you do, and where you're currently heading, mate.
Yeah, look, I played Australian rules football. Now, particularly people away from Australia, they might say, what rules? There aren't too many rules in Aussie rules. But look, it's an Indigenous sport here in Australia, and it's a national sport, and it's something that we hold very dear. We live in Adelaide, and I played for the Adelaide side called the Adelaide Crows, and that was my life for 13 years. Before that, just going back a little bit further, I grew up in a small country town, moved down to Adelaide to play football. So been pretty much my life, and then post-football, been involved in the media, both in television and on the radio.
Yeah, awesome, mate. Mate, I'd like to go on that journey with you a little bit, and let's go back to good old Port Pirie and the days there, and tell us a story about what you did and why, and where it led you to, if you don't mind, and start as early as you like.
Yeah, well, Port Pirie is an industrial town. It's got the biggest lead smelter in the Southern Hemisphere, and basically, whilst I was pretty good at school, all I really wanted to do was play footy. So by the time I reached year 11, it was pretty much, let's get out of school, let's get a job so I can have some money in my pocket and I can be playing football, basically. So I got a job at the lead smelter. Most of the kids my age, because there's no university in the small country town, and it was basically get a trade. That's what everyone did. So I was a sparky by trade.
Okay.
And that was great fun, and it was, being 16 and out in the workforce and playing football in the country was fantastic. But I always had this greater drive of wanting to see how far it could take me. And in those days, there was no such thing as professional footballers. Everyone just played on the weekend, and the good players got paid a little bit. Yeah. But I was keen to try and get to Adelaide and see if I could, play in those higher leagues. So whilst I was young and enjoying my life in the country and the enormous freedoms that come in the country, there was always this thought in the back of my head I wanted to get to Adelaide. And after 3 years of playing football in the country, I got approached by one of the talent scouts to come down and play in Adelaide. So made the big move and moved to Adelaide, got my trade transferred and worked at Mitsubishi Motors.
Down on South Road, yeah.
Down on South Road. They're no longer there, unfortunately. But yeah, so I worked as an electrician there and started playing football professionally, seriously, and getting paid for it.
Yeah, awesome, mate. So the football's always been part of the family blood, I'm guessing, in the country town.
Yeah.
Is that...
My dad was a really good player. My brother was a good player, and I often give a lot of credit to my brother. He was 18 months older than me and bigger and stronger. So, all those backyard games, I was always hard up against it because trying to beat him, trying to match him. And I think there's a stat somewhere that says that of all the world champions, there's an overrepresentation of the younger siblings because they're always just trying to keep up. And that was certainly the case with my big brother. He was a great sports person, but probably, didn't really have the desire to test that, whereas I was always different. I was keen to...
Okay, well, why is that, mate? Because I've sort of, in doing the research and hearing you before, you've talked about the fact that he was a very good sportsman in his own right. Why is it that, and trying to think back on the motivations. Why you've gone on to great things in the AFL where your brother, for whatever reason, didn't.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept. And I've one of the great traits, going back one step further to my parents, Mum and Dad have grown up and lived in Port Pirie their whole lives. You know, they. I'm not saying this disparagingly, but they're pretty simple folk. They paid $2,000 for their first house about, I don't know how many years ago, and never had a mortgage. You know, that's just the way they've been. And when I look at them, one of the great traits I think they have is they have this contentment where they don't have to keep up with the Joneses. They're not striving to have the latest of this and the latest of that. And an example is I went home recently and we sat down at the kitchen table and the knives and forks we were using, they were sort of bone-handled and they're quite nice. But I said to Mum, I've been out of here for 30 years and you've got the same knives and forks. And she said, well, there's nothing wrong with them. In actual fact, I got them for my engagement present in her glory box when she was 18 years of age. So that's 60 years ago. But it's like, it's not broken and I don't need to go and have the latest because they still are fine. Yep. And I think that is a really strange and unique trait to have these days because everyone wants the latest and greatest and they want to have things now and you know, pay later and all that sort of stuff. So I think there's an element of that about my brother. He loved the country, loves fishing and loves sport, the laid-back nature of it. And, he was just really content in where he was.
And on
not
the
there's
flip
anything
side
wrong
of that,
with that.
No, exactly right. It's horses for courses. I totally agree. But what that's telling me, I guess, is in yourself, you're always aspiring to do a little bit more. When you probably early on, you made the decision, I want to play league football, probably in the Sandful in those days. Once that thought's in your head, what were the things that you did to give you the best opportunity to do that?
I've always been a big person for goal setting, you know, so I've always thought about things of, you know, you have a dream and that's great and you think, wow, I really love to do that. But I think one of the things that's really helped me was just trying to draw a roadmap of how I'm going to get there and, you know, all the little signposts along the way that you need to tick off, you know. So when I was playing in the country, I look back of who are some other players that have played in the country that have gone on to be successful. How did they do it? What were they doing? At my age, how good were they? And was I measuring up to those guys? And what I found was that I was, you know, on a par or maybe even slightly in front of some of the other guys that have had success. So that gave me confidence. And then every time you were able to hit those little markers, it just feeds the beast, you know, and you start to say, I'm heading in the right direction. And, you know, if we keep going, I'm going to get to where I want to go. So that's been a powerful lesson. And look, there's an element of luck in that because if you do that first up and it works for you and you go forward, you just think, oh, this is just the way life is. And look, let's not be stupid. There's been lots of bumps and backward steps and that along the way. But I was pretty lucky where pretty much early on when I set those goals, I was able to achieve them. And I made them pretty much bite-sized as well, so they were very achievable. Yeah. And then that gave me great confidence to keep moving forward. Yeah,
that's awesome, mate, because for listeners who don't know, Mark is a premiership captain 2 years in a row back in 97, 98.
That's it.
From memory. A Herculean effort in that regard. But am I right in saying, Mark, because this is what interests me, is that, you know, people see the success, but they don't see the hard work that's gone into it. From what I understand, you almost didn't make the list when they started off in the Crows. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, Graham Corns was the coach. So it was basically a new team was formed. So they expanded the competition. A new team was formed in Adelaide. So they invited about 70-odd players out, and from that 70, they were going to pick 42. So everyone was invited out to train. We didn't get paid. You weren't insured. It was just go out, run around, and be ordered around, and then if you were good enough and you made the list, well, then we'll work out how much we're going to pay you. Yep. Well, Graham Corns was the coach, and I've become good friends with Graham since, and we worked together. Yep. He basically said I was the last bloke picked.
Is that right?
And he actual fact he had a list of he's a meticulous record keeper, and he had a list of this one night at training they were going to cut X amount of players, and I was on the list to be cut. And one of the players that was going to be kept got injured that night. And they said, well, he's injured. There's a little cloud over him. Maybe we won't cut Bickley tonight. We'll just keep him on for another week. And And I was able just to hang in there. And in the end, I made it to the final list of 42. And then I couldn't believe it, because when I went out there, I had no expectations. I wasn't in the top 42 players in the competition, but I just had this attitude of, well, this is going to be great for my footy if I can train with these guys and just soak it up. Who knows? It'll just make me a better person. And then the longer that went, the more I realised that these blokes were the same as what I was, and I had some traits that perhaps they didn't have, and then I was able to get onto that list, and then that's that little bite-sized goal. And then the next thing was, I want to play one game. Just let me play one game. And then one game came, and then it was, I want to be a regular player, and then I want to be a leader, and then all those little signposts, we just sort of kept ticking them off.
Yeah, and I guess what I'm hearing there is, because there are some people who are just born gifted with skills that it's almost lazy talent, in that they're able to achieve things quickly, but it doesn't become sustainable because they're not prepared to put the work in. Having listened to Cornsey talk about those times, and he didn't really rate you at that point, but he saw something. He kept hearing things about, I think, probably your work ethic as much as anything. Can you talk about that and how that, because to go from almost not even making the grade to being the captain in 7 years, I think it was 7 years, it's a pretty short space of time.
Yeah, it is.
What was it that then started to grow, and they started to recognise, hold on, there's a leader of our team here? Yeah,
well, there's a couple of things. One thing was, and look, at the time I used to cop a bit of stick about it, they used to call me the coach's pet. And that was because Graham was a meticulous planner, and he would give us dossiers of the team we're playing next week, and he would write out a little write-up on every player, and this is how they play. And back in those days, it wasn't as professional as what it was now. They used to end up in the bottom of everyone's bag, basically, because, look, I've watched him play, I know how he plays. But for myself, it was like, well, for the sake of half an hour and reading it, there might just be something in there that I might know about. And because no one was reading them, Graham would start to deliberately put mistakes in there, like Bushy Martin, he's a left footer, and Bushy Martin's a right footer. And I would say, Graham, you've made a mistake. You're the bloke who's reading it, nobody else would pick it. And so I just did everything that I could possibly do to give myself every chance. So, and even things like, I became a really good tackler, and I did lots of the sort of unsexy type styles of play and defensive stuff really well, because I thought, you know what, I can't kick it as well as other blokes. I can't mark it as well, and I'm not as big or as quick as other blokes. So I'll do all the stuff that everyone hates doing, and then that'll keep me in the side. But what has come to pass is those things that are less sexy, they're bloody effective, and you become a really reliable player and a consistent player. Yep. And as you get older, and I went on to coach as well, blokes in a team that you can trust and you know what you're going to get every time they turn out on the park, they're really, really effective and valuable. Yep. And that was probably my greatest trait, that I was a really consistent, reliable performer. Well,
and you listen. What I'm hearing is that a coach wants people around who are going to listen to what they say. And if he's picking up from lists of paper that, well, Bicks is the guy that's actually taking on board the message here, then you're going to get that sort of support, and you're building respect and relationship through that. The captaincy, mate, you mentioned that, play a game, become a regular player, or perhaps as a leadership opportunity. Talk us through that journey in terms of at what point you thought, well, there's going to be an opening for a leader here at some point in time. Yeah. Maybe that's me. What thought process you went through, and what actions do you take then to take you towards that? Yeah,
look, I was really lucky. I had a manager who used to manage my fortunes, and that's a bad word, manage my affairs. And he was an older guy who retired, and he gave me, sage advice about lots of different things, and he became just a great mentor for me. And I remember after I just started playing and I'm in the team and I was just starting to feel comfortable, he posed this question to me once. He said, where do you think you'll be in 5 years' time? And when you're 22 or 23 years of age, you feel like you're bulletproof, and you feel like you're going to play forever, and you're not really thinking about what 5 years' time looks like. So he said, and I said, well, I don't know, hopefully I'm, playing footy and I'm, going really well. And he said, no, I want you to seriously think about it. And he said, come back and we'll meet again next week, and we'll talk about what it looks like. And that just started me thinking about what that looked like. And it was about, well, hopefully I've played a lot of footy, and hopefully I've, had some personal success in terms of become one of the better players in the team. And I'd always, in my mind, wanted to be a leader. And I looked at the guys who were the captain and the vice captain at the time, and they were all probably 4 or 5 years older than me. And then there was a gap of no one. And then there was a group of about 8 or 10 of us that were all the same age. And the sort of, talk about light bulb moments where you think, well, someone from this group is going to be the leader. So when we reconvened with my manager, Ian Gray, I said to Ian, look, I'd really like to be perhaps a leader of this side, maybe even captain. He said, yeah, that's good. He said, I was having the similar type thought. So, okay, so what can we start to do now that in 4 years' time, when the captaincy becomes available, you are, in a really good position to be able to do it. So we started to do some things, and, I did a leadership course and had some one-on-one coaching in that regard. I did some public speaking and lots of other bits and pieces, and we tried to work out what were the skill deficiencies and what were the areas that were going to be important. And as it turned out, I reckon it was about 4 years later, we got a new coach, Malcolm Blight, who was a very successful coach, came in. The older guys retired and were no longer needed, and I was appointed as the captain. And I can still remember that first night. The news service or whatever it was said, Mark Bickley was no surprises, was made the captain, and as much for his off-field demeanour and qualities as for his on-field qualities. And people just said to me, it was an obvious choice. It was an obvious choice on that day, but 5 years earlier it wasn't an obvious choice. So once again, there was some real learnings from that and just great advice that I received.
Yeah, had you voiced to the rest of the team and the admin down at the Crows that I would like to put my hand up? Or
no, not really. No. It was more what I was trying to do was just make sure that I was, like the shining example, that person who was the first on the track, first off the track, who was trying to help other people, just set that example where, if you're thinking of who is the model citizen in this team, that was, trying to be me, and as well as trying to bring as many people along for the ride as well.
Of course, because putting it in context, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Mark, but at that stage of the game, the captains were generally just hero players, and the off-field stuff was nice to have. But if they were a guru, then that was it. So you'd probably set the benchmark in a sense for how the game's progressed in recognising that it's not just your ball ability, it's your overall leadership skills that are going to make or break where the club goes.
And that's exactly right. It was just always the best player was the person who you turned to. And in actual fact, Robert Walls, who was a really respected commentator, I remember after I was appointed, and I think the first couple of games we didn't win, and I'm not sure how I played, but it couldn't have been too well. I remember him describing Adelaide as the only club that's got a scrubber as a captain. We went on to win the flag that year, so look.
Maybe he made his words.
Well, I don't hold that against Robert because he's a good man and he calls it as he sees it. But that's an indication of, back then it was always the best player in the team. But what I guess we were starting on the journey of, and I knew that I wasn't the best player in the team. So when there was those moments in a game where you needed someone to stand up, and generally that's when everyone looked at the captain. At that moment, I would make sure that I would be the one trying to rally the troops and rally the players who I knew had the ability to alter the game. So it was, I had a very collaborative approach to the way I was going to, try and lead this team. And to be honest, we had success, and it was as much. I know we have leadership groups now, but in a sense, I think we definitely had a leadership group then. The only thing was we wouldn't sit around a table after training. We'd sit in a communal bath, which was still, it was very, very unhygienic, but that was what we did back in the mid to late 90s after training.
Mate, I want to talk a little bit about, everyone sees the glory of the game and the demigod status that, particularly in South Australia and quite a few states in the country, that footballers enjoy. What's that pressure like? I mean, the media pressure, the pressure of having to perform. I mean, it's I don't know what it was like then, but you look at it's all stats now. If you don't get the stats, then you mightn't make the list next week. How did you cope with because that's pretty constant pressure from what I see.
Yeah, performance
Can you
pressure.
talk about that?
Yeah, and like I say, it's even worse now. Like you say, you got stats, but you've got a GPS on your back. It records how many sprints you've done, how many times you're running in offense, and how fast compared to how fast you run in defense. So there is no hiding on the footy field at the moment. Back in our day, it was still the media pressure where if you had a bad loss, it's back page of the paper, it's everything, and particularly if you're one of the leaders, if you're not performing, when the team's not performing, then there's a bit of a spotlight on you. And I think that for me there was a quantum shift that happened, and it was about the year 2000 where we started to become full-time footballers. Yeah. So everyone gave away their job, and we started turning up at footy practice at 8 o'clock in the morning and leaving at 5 o'clock at night.
Right.
And that was a quantum shift because before that, whilst we were getting paid well, we always had another job that we were doing, and if footy didn't work out, you had something to fall back on.
Yeah.
Once you start to create a generation of kids that come out of school into football, and that is their livelihood, and if that doesn't work out, then they're sort of shrugging their shoulders of what you're going to do. Yeah. That's when real pressure comes, So,
of course.
I and this is a little bit later on as well when I was doing some coaching. Players that have had a mortgage, who are 24 years of age, who have been in the game for 5 years, they're in the last year of their contract, because this is all short-term contract stuff, not playing in the league side, and they're thinking, shivers, if I don't get a kick this week and if I don't get picked, that means my contract's not going to be renewed. How do I pay the mortgage? I'm 25 years of age. What do? I don't have any skills. So that's when this real pressure kicks in. And I think that is one of the really important things, and having something away from football is so important. And I know the Players Association have worked really hard on trying to upskill the players so that they do have something, or they're studying, or they're doing something whilst they're playing. And generally the ones that have that and have a release and a feeling of sort of worth away from just football, they're the ones that are pretty well adjusted. Yeah, and
it probably helps them on field as well, because that mental pressure to some degree is not there, and it's very similar to the industry I'm in, Mark, where we see a lot of hard-working Australians. They focus on their career and they focus on their income, but they don't have time to think about investing in something that's going to sustain them long term. And it gets to a point where mid-40s, early 50s, it's, oh shit,
something happens. I
can't stop working because I haven't invested in anything that's going to make that happen. Let's talk about that in your own sense. So you've been a premiership captain 2 years in a row. You're really at the peak of the game. You play on for a few years. You must be starting to think, what's next? Absolutely. What am I going to do? Take us through that journey.
Yeah, look, the public speaking course was a really good investment, because as the profile of AFL grew, there started to become football shows on TV, and the timing was great. We were a really good team. I was the captain, so I started to do lots of television work. The footy show had just been born, and basically it was just a Victorian-centric show. So all of a sudden, I was the first interstate guy that put my hand up and said, I'm happy to fly across on a Thursday, do the show. It finished at about 11 o'clock at night. I'll catch a 6 o'clock flight back in the morning so I can get to training by 9 a.m. So that doesn't sound like much, but it is a sort of a measured risk, because all of a sudden, if you're not playing well, back in those days, it was, those guys that are doing all the media, they're getting ahead of themselves. But I could see that this was a hugely successful show, enormous profile, and as I said, I'm getting towards the end. This is something that I quite enjoy, and it will create some opportunities. So as I sort of finished, I moved pretty much straight off of the football field, and 3 months later, I was reading the sports news on Channel 9, which was an interesting time in terms of that sort of transition from being a veteran in one field and highly successful to going in and being pretty much a trainee with, some skills, but when you're a footy player, if you had to rank a footy player out of 10 when he's on TV, if he performs at 7, you're thinking, gee, he's a really good performer. But if you have to rank your newsreader, you want him to be 9 out of 10 or 9.5 because that's his job. So 7 out of 10 from a footballer crossing over to being a newsreader, it wasn't pretty early on, but I had some good mentors in that sphere as well.
Yeah, was it? How difficult was it to give the game up, mate? Because but when you've played at that level for so long, and there's a little bit fearful around what the next step is, that some players will keep playing indefinitely, or what was your feeling and thinking around that time, mate?
Well, I was lucky because the last probably 2 years, the enjoyment factor had started to wane for me, and the only reason I kept playing is because we were still close to winning a premiership, and we had a great side, and I wanted that one more crack at it.
Yep.
But I'd had interest from Channel 9, and they had indicated that there was a job there when I finished, and that's the big thing, and that's what I've always tried to do, is always have choices.
Yeah.
So it's not, I'm going to finish my football this year, I wonder what I'm going to do. It's like, I'm going to finish my football this year. Am I going to do this or am I going to do this? You know, and it's about having that time to prepare for that. So having the job there and starting a new phase of sort of a career was exciting. So when I retired, there was this enormous relief. I finished that part of it, and I've finished on my terms and still playing reasonable footy and all that sort of stuff. And now I can go on to something different where it's really challenging and it's really looking forward to going to work and getting better, as opposed to football, which had become really mundane, and going to work and scratching and scraping to maintain a level that I'd been at for a fair while.
You become a victim of your own reputation, I guess.
Yeah, and you're absolutely petrified that if my last year I played just rubbish and I get dropped, that people will say, that's how you're remembered. Remember for the guy who played that 1 year too long. So I felt that pressure, and when it did end okay for me, and there was just enormous relief, and a new phase started, and that was the media, including television and radio.
Mate, the physicality of the game, again, for those listeners who aren't aware of AFL, it is probably going to be one of the most gruelling sports on the planet, I believe. Has it had its after effects, mate? I mean, physically, are you feeling the scars?
Well, I'm pretty lucky. I had an unbelievable run with injury. I didn't have a whole lot of injuries at all, and
was that about your preparation and whatnot as well?
There's an element of luck, but I think my body shape, for those who don't know me, I'm a pretty compact sort of fella, and I'm sort of solid through the thighs and hips, and so the taller the players are and the more gangly they are, the more issues they've had with knees and ankles, the longer levers. It's an unforgiving sport, Aussie rules. So, I didn't have a whole lot of issues, so I'm still in pretty good shape. A lot of my friends have had knee replacements and hip replacements, so I'm 49 years of age now, so, many of my friends had multiple operations, 8 to 12 operations on knees and hips and ankles, and they're having them replaced now, so I'm actually okay. But, I broke my leg, I broke my foot and ankle, and I had an elbow injury that required 2 or 3 operations, and little fingers aren't great. I'm just holding them up in front of Bushy now, and they're all pointing in different directions. But by and large, I still enjoy, going to the gym and lifting some weights and running on the treadmill, and pretty much unscathed. Yeah,
fantastic, mate. All right, well, let's talk about the transition from that point in time. Got into the media.
Yep.
Again, from my understanding, you sort of delved into the retail sphere, and you took on the chairmanship of SA Great during that period. They all sound pretty hectic to me.
Yeah. So the reading of the news I used to do over the weekend, so Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays when all the sport was happening. So I'd do that, which left me some time during the week. And I've always had, I've always dabbled in the stock market, and I've followed the.
Let's talk about that. I'm going to dive straight in there because having an interest in investing, and I invest in shares as well as property. What was the trigger that got you to start thinking, I'm going to stick some money into the share market?
Well, it was actually about a great mate of mine, David Pittman, who I played football with, was a stockbroker. And and timing is everything in life. And when we'd just started playing footy together and we're just starting to earn some money, was right when all the public floats were happening. CSL, Commonwealth Serum Laboratory, Telstra, Commonwealth Bank.
Yep.
I fell into the Commonwealth Serum Laboratory. I bought 1,500 shares at $2.35. Could you believe that they would go on to be the behemoth they are? Look, I ended up selling because, for whatever reason, many years later at $51. Commonwealth Bank, which we had some shares in, I think they floated about $7 or $9, and you can see what they've done and the dividends. So I did that early on, and I'm thinking this is a reasonable sort of setup here, the way this is going, and having someone who you trust, who you spend 6 or 7 hours a day with, with a lot of time to kill and talking about stuff, you got a fair understanding of it. So I've did that, and look, I've given you 2 of the wins. I'm a bit like a racing punter. There were plenty that went the other way. We delved heavily into the tech crash of 2001, and we had lots of different things go wrong. But where I sit now, I sit having a pretty good understanding of there's highs and lows, and if you invest in good management or companies that have good management, you're going to be pretty solid. And so that interest in management, boards, that sort of ticked the box in my head that said, at some stage later on in life, that might be something that I might want to get into. So with that time on my hands, I got offered to be the chair of SA Great, which is like an advocate for SA produce and at the great state we have here. And so at the time, I did the Australian Institute of Company Directors course, which was really good, and got an understanding of what it meant to sit on a board, and that's still something that I'm hoping that will start to sort of increase as I'm getting older and now have the time to be able to do it more freely.
Tell us about the retail experience, the AFL shops.
Yeah, so AFL stores were basically selling AFL merchandise, and I was involved in that. We started the first stores here in Adelaide, so we ended up with 3 stores, and it was absolutely fantastic. It kicked off and Crows won the flag, but as time went on, there became the rules around, we were a franchise and we could only sell that. And the rules around who else could sell it really started to sort of lapse. So all of a sudden it started popping up in your Targets and Kmarts, and all of a sudden the clubs realised that there was a lot of money in this, and so they would direct market to their members. And then of course the internet came, and it was very easy if you barracked for Essendon, for example. Before the internet, you couldn't buy anything Essendon unless you bought it from our shop. As soon as the internet came and you could look at the club website and you became confident of, I want a scarf, I'll just put my details in and it gets sent straight to my front door. So that started to wane. At the same time, it was a bit of a perfect storm. We had a big store in King William Street. The GFC hit. They put a tram line down the middle of the street where you couldn't cross the road. There was a whole range of things that went wrong. And in the end, once the leases came up, we weren't making any money. We just let them lapse, and that was it. But it ended up being a reasonably costly exercise. The last couple of years, we gave back a fair bit of the money because we had an escalating lease agreement that was hard to service. Yeah,
challenging times. Tell me, mate, anyone that I've seen successful over time generally has a really supportive partner, and AFL's it's quite a selfish existence really during the years that you're playing, which doesn't leave much time for anything or anyone else. How did that affect you, if at all, during that time, mate? Yeah,
I've been married twice, so my first wife and I, she went through the whole football experience, and you're exactly right. It is such a selfish experience, and at the same time, we had 3 small children as well. Got 3 daughters under 5 while I was playing, basically, and unfortunately that did take a toll. And what happened after football? I talked about being sort of re-energised in this new career. I threw myself into that and doing TV and radio and lots of different stuff because I was reasonably in demand, and that took a huge toll on my home life, and unfortunately my marriage broke down. And that was a really challenging time because we had the business which wasn't going great, and that was all intertwined. But thankfully, we've been able to navigate our way through it, and the kids have always been our number one focus, and we've been, and we're immensely proud of the way they've grown up.
Yeah.
But it was a time when pretty much I talked about the goal setting and having plans and moving forward, and most of the things in my life had gone pretty well. And at that stage, and having a mum and dad that had been together forever, I really felt like this is the sort of the sky crashed in at that stage. I was the first big failure that I'd had.
Yeah, I share that failure. I'm exactly the same, mate. Golden boy who did wonderful things in business, and all of a sudden I turn around and my marriage is gone, and I found that personally very difficult to contend with because I've got parents who died together.
Yep.
What did you learn from that, mate? Taking away from that experience, because I don't know about you, but that was a real wake-up call for me. I had to really have a good look in the mirror. What changed, and what things did you do differently from that point, do you think?
Look, it's the first realisation of the work-life balance, and that everything has a cost, and at that stage I just didn't know how to say no. There was opportunities coming up, and I was doing lots of stuff. And and also the treadmill of looking at what other people had, and we were thinking about buying a holiday house, and we were going to do and lots of different things. But it's no good if you're spending your whole life working to try and get all this money to try and do stuff if you don't have anyone to share it with. And unfortunately, like I said, I reckon I was pretty selfish at that stage, and just missed all the signs. Like my wife was at the time was calling out and saying, "Look, I really want your attention, and our family wants your attention," but I just didn't see the calling signs. And then it was when it finally happened, it was too late. So, and then the other thing, so there's that's their whole life. There's upheaval with friends and finances and all that. And in the end, you can, I moved on in the coming years, and I met my now current wife. Yeah. And at that stage, things were reasonably tight because of all the stuff that had happened. But when you start to feel happy again, it sort of doesn't much matter, how much money you have. It doesn't cost much to go out or cook a meal or go down the beach or to do that. So when you're happy, happy is and content. We talked about parents being content. Yeah. I look back and thought, I was just thinking, trying to keep up with the Joneses and trying to do the next big thing. There wasn't much contentment there. Whereas when I did start to open my eyes and see what was important, and that was kids and family, like contentment started to feel all right. And I realised I didn't need $1 million or the biggest house on the street to have that contentment. Yeah,
I think a lot of Aussie blokes in particular fight this battle of I've always got to be doing better, I've always got to have bigger, I've always got to be doing it faster. The question that I often ask people is, well, what does your ideal life look like, and how much is enough to do that? Yeah. Let me ask you that question. What does your ideal life look like? What's your perfect day, week, month, year look like, mate?
Yeah, I have a great job at the moment where I'm on drive radio. So we're on from 4 till 6 in the afternoon. We talk sport. And during the footy season, we commentate sport. So, the adage of if you're doing something you love, you'll never work a day in your life. Literally, I come into work, and generally we're in between 11 and 12. And, we read all the papers, jump on the internet, see what's going on. And then we're interviewing, great sports people and people that are doing fantastic things. So what that does, it allows me a couple of things. One is I'm getting up, I'm organising with my wife, and we're getting the kids to school, and the two of us can drop them off to school each day, and you can never miss a school play or the sports day or whatever it is. So that's great. Yep. The next thing, if you get them to school by 8:30 or 9 o'clock or whatever the time is, it's then a couple of hours to do something, So if it's I talked about going to the gym, and, I love getting on a treadmill and putting the headphones in and listening to podcasts like yours and others. Or if it's a cracking day, it's walking along the beach. Like that balance is real, and that makes me feel good. It makes me feel good about the fact I'm, leading a reasonably healthy life. So in my eyes, I don't have this desire that I need to retire in 5 years. I actually really enjoy what we're doing.
Yep.
And for when I project forward, what I want to be doing is stuff that I can do perhaps. So I'm writing an article now, and I'm really enjoying writing.
Yeah, okay.
I'm hoping that as things sort of wind down for me, that I can still be relevant enough to be able to write an article each week, that it's a feature piece or something.
Brilliant.
That I can, on our show, we might talk once a week to some of the experts on, that have an opinion on certain things, So I'm hoping that, once again, if you're still working and you're still contributing and doing stuff and relevant in things that are important and earning some income, but you're not absolutely just having to wind down totally and saying, oh, what am I going to do now?
Well, 3 out of 5 retirees are dead within 5 years, mate, because their purpose in life is gone. So I'm with you. I'll never stop doing what I'm doing, but I just won't do it as much, and I'll be very fussy about who I deal with.
And I know with the contributors that we have that come on our show, when they come on, it's like it's a highlight for us, but it's also a highlight for them. They're coming in and they're, it's the camaraderie, it's the habit of, the appointment that you set to come and do that thing that you do. So I'm looking forward to that. And I love gardening as well. So, on a weekend, when the weather's fabulous, there's nothing better than, I love putting the radio on if there's some cricket on in the background, or if it's footy in the footy season. Yeah. It's mowing the lawn, it's cultivating plants, it's whatever it is. But, I don't know if it's a man thing, but starting with something that's messy and looks a bit overgrown, and then at the end of the day you sit in your chair and you're a little bit stuffed and you're having a beer and you look back and say, have a look at that. How good does this look? There's something about achieving something and then just looking at it. And then, I lived under 2 stinking great big gum trees. Yep. By Wednesday of the middle of the week, it's all messy again. And then the cycle starts again. But no, it's just something, this sense of starting something, finishing something. I've achieved something today.
Yeah, no, awesome, mate. Jumping forward then, you continue doing what you're doing. But I find a lot of Australians, they focus on their work and the income that comes from that work, but very few are investing in something in parallel with that will help to replace that income and sustain it long term. You've talked about shares, and you've obviously had some pretty good success in that arena. Has property fitted into your thinking at all, mate?
It's interesting with property because at the same time as I was investing in shares, I have had units and houses and investment properties along the way. But when I first started, it's interesting how you can be shaped. I bought an investment property for $99,500. It was a 3-bedroom townhouse in Ascot Park, which is in the sort of southwestern suburbs of Adelaide. Yep. And I lived in that, and it was pretty good, and it was cool, and I had my own house. I thought I was pretty good at about 24 years of age and paying it off and playing footy. Yep. Then I bought a house and started to renovate that, and then had people move into the unit. So we had tenants, and it was negatively geared. Anyway, when we went to move to a bigger house, about 10 years later, I decided, I'll sell this property. It's, lots of hassles and stuff with it. Yep. I sold it for $101,000 10 years later. Really? And interest rates during that time ranged from about, 13.5% to, whatever. So
this is late 80s.
Yeah. Yep. So it was early 90s through to the late 90s. So So my first experience of holding a house for 10 years and having 1% capital growth whilst I've been sort of paying income into it wasn't a great one. Yeah. But then over the journey, I've had lots of capital growth. I bought a place, fortunately, down close to the beach at Glenelg, and that had massive capital gains. So, that shaped me a little bit because the supply and demand sort of ratio. If you're going to buy something that this is my sort of theory that I have in my head. Buy something that can't be replicated easily. And there's only so many houses that are within walking distance of the beach, or there are only so many houses that are in or units that are in close proximity to public transport or to the city or to a big hospital or to a university. So that's sort of shaped my decision making. When I look at something, I sort of say, what are the barriers to entry? How can someone replicate this easily or not? And if they can't, I think that produces a premium around that.
Totally. And what you've moved from is the 80% who just think property's property to the 1% who recognise that if they've got something unique that everyone wants but there's very little of it around,
That's right.
then that's where you're going to do well. So pretty good lessons there. Okay, I'm going to jump back a little bit now because finished footy, jumped into the media, you're doing the retail thing, you get tapped on the shoulder to come back and get into the coaching regime. I reckon the two worst jobs in the country, mate, are a footy coach and a Prime Minister because they're like revolving doors. What was the attraction? What was your thinking around why am I going to do this and where did that lead to, mate?
Yeah, so the attraction was the last couple of years that I played, Neil Craig was an assistant coach. Neil Craig then took over as the head coach, and I had enormous respect for Neil, and he's a very learned gentleman, and I love the way he sort of goes about it. And he'd been on to me for a year or two to come back to Adelaide and be an assistant coach, and it was along the lines of, I'm not sure if you've read the book Good to Great. Yep. It was the succession plan. So go find the people, get them on the bus, and then once they're on the bus, get them in the right seat. So that was the plan. And I guess after 5 years in the media and initially I got out of footy because there were huge ups and downs, and then I got into the media and I just found that the media was good because there were the ups and downs. The peaks weren't as high and the troughs weren't as low. But after 5 years, I just started to those sort
almost
of
bored.
Yeah, not sort of bored, but the competitive juices started to flow again, and I'm thinking, here's this attraction where, someone wants me to come in here, and the end goal was to be the senior coach of the Adelaide Footy Club, which was a pretty privileged position when you think there's only 16 jobs in Australia, really.
Dead right.
So I got back in there and was doing some stuff and moving towards that, and unfortunately, Neil, the trajectory of success was going, very much in the right direction, and then we had a couple of things that went wrong, and the side's performance struggled, and everyone struggled. And unfortunately, Neil, his fate was sealed, and he decided to step down. But I'd only been an assistant for a couple of years at that stage, so I was nowhere near ready to take it on. So I was given the interim job. So he stepped down midway through the year. I took over for the last 6 weeks and absolutely loved it. But in terms of at the end of the year, when they appointed a new coach, I applied for it, didn't get it, went to Brendan Sanderson. Who's a great mate of mine, and much, much more qualified after having, a longer apprenticeship, had success as an assistant coach at Geelong. So he was great. Loved working with him, and we had some relative success and got very close to making a grand final again. But then once things went wrong and he parted ways, and at that stage I became a little bit disillusioned with,
because of the way he was treated, or
because of the transient nature and how things could change so quickly. He was to give a backstory to people that mightn't be interested, and for the people listening in America, we generally hold on to our coaches a little bit longer than perhaps some other sports in the world,
or prime ministers.
Yeah, but he was reappointed for a further 3-year term 1 year, then pretty much the next year he was sacked, and I just thought, how can people think that he's the right man for the job 1 minute, and then because a few things, some of which were out of his control, went against him, that he's no longer the right man for the job? And is this the industry that I really want to work in? That,
scapegoating almost.
Yeah, you can spend your whole life trying to be a senior coach, and then after a short period of time, bang, it's over. Yeah. And so I had once again, and this is another moment where I sat down with a friend of mine, and he's a younger bloke actually, but a bit more of a lateral thinker. His name's James Begley, who I played football with, and he's a quite successful entrepreneur now. Yep. And we just started talking about, if how much is enough, because I always strived, spent 5 or 6 years striving to be a senior coach. And he said, okay, so what if you were a senior coach, then you want to do something else. And I was worried that I was slipping back into that trap of, it's all consuming. It's the first thing you think of getting up in the morning. It's the last thing you think of when you got your head on the pillow. Yep. I'd remarried. I had 2 sons now, so I've got 5 children altogether. The little boys just starting school, and we had this conversation about, work-life balance, what I'd learnt from the end of my playing days where my marriage broke down. So, made a decision that, you know what, put your ego in your back pocket about wanting to be a senior coach and it all being about you, and maybe just start to cultivate, some of the things that are truly important, and that is having a good work-life balance, looking after yourself, spending some time when the kids are at such an impressionable age. And I mentioned that when I was playing footy, my daughters were sort of all, that age between 3 and 5 and 7, where I wasn't home a lot of the time where I should have been. They missed out, and I was sort of thought about, I don't want to miss this again the second time around. So moved back into the media and where I am now, which is much more friendly, as we've discussed.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's a pretty big call though, mate, because most people having their ego stroked by that opportunity would jump at it and then count the cost later on. So, full admiration for being able to step back and say, well, this might be great now, but it's going to have long-term implications.
Well, one of the other things that for me to actually to live that dream, I would have had to move from Adelaide and go to another state and another club. Now, people move all the time, I get that. But at that stage as well, I had my 3 daughters who I was sharing sort of time with. Of
course.
So it means moving away from them, and they were sort of early to mid-teens.
Yeah, important
Mum
time.
and Dad are still at home in Port Pirie in the country, but they're 2 hours away. And, my dad had some health issues. He had colon cancer and some other things that went wrong, and he spent 3 months in hospital. And I started to think about what would that look like if I was in Melbourne or Brisbane or Sydney, and I was able to see him a couple of times a week. How would that work out if I was away from Adelaide? So there were lots of different sort of feed-ins that in the end I thought, why would I want to move away and chase something that's not guaranteed, and at the same time risk so many things that are really important to me. So in the end, it was a pretty easy decision.
So it's almost a values decision that you made at the end of the day, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Which, again, there aren't a lot of people who are smart enough to even know what their values are, until often it's too late. So there's a thinking process there that goes, right, okay, well, what's really going to be best for me and our family long term, mate? No, full marks on that, buddy. Before we move off that subject, when you're sitting in the chair, I think you were coach for 6 games or thereabouts. What was that spotlight like? I can't even imagine what that must have been like, mate.
Yeah, it's all consuming, and like when you're an assistant coach, you sort of micromanaging. Your area, I'd look after the forwards or the midfielders, and you've got 8 blokes, and you're just so immersed in that, and everything that's happening on that part of the ground and how that impacts. And when you're the senior coach, you just don't realise the breadth of stuff that comes across your desk. So
immense.
Yeah. So lots of stuff happened in my time. The last 6 weeks, we had Phil Davis come into me and say, I've been offered an enormous amount of money to go and be the captain of the GWS Giants, a new team was starting, and so he had to go in and talk to the players and say that he was leaving. Jack Gunston strolled into my office and said that I can't play here anymore. I need to go back to Melbourne, and so here's 2 really, talented, the future of the footy club who are sort of, we're negotiating with to try and keep them at the club, but we weren't able to do that. Yeah. There's list management decisions that are taking place about players' futures for next year. There's people who are suggesting that we need to be playing this bloke, even though he's not in front of 4 or 5 other players. We want to have a look at him to see if he's going to be any good for next year. And I'm sort of saying, hang on a minute, I really want to play this bloke, and this guy is playing for his future. So how do I play a bloke who's nowhere near the player in front of him just because you want to have a look at him to see if he's any good? I'm just not sure that, and the value system, how that works, and rewarding the players that are doing the right thing. So there was lots of stuff going on, not to mention, parents of players ringing up, doctors giving you inputs about this guy's not fit. There's just so much that comes across the desk.
Be relentless.
I enjoyed it enormously, but I tell you what, I take my hat off to guys who have done it for, like Clarkson and Sheedy and that for long periods of time. Yeah. They are special individuals because they just they've been able to to absorb all that information for so long, and it's quite remarkable.
Yeah, it is quite remarkable. I totally agree, mate. And you're probably, in a way, fortunate if you had a taste, because that probably helped you in your decision making.
Once again, you just
that.
know that it is a 24/7 job.
Yeah,
and I'm comparing it to probably the CEO of big companies who
totally.
There's just no switch off, and
worse than that, you're under the media spotlight as well. I mean, if the team's doing well, it's the players.
Yep.
If it's not doing well, it's your fault.
That's right, and and you're answerable to everyone. You're presenting to the board. Once a month. You're doing interviews explaining why you did this every day. So yeah, it's a very high profile and quite demanding role.
Yeah, okay, that's awesome. Well, mate, loving the radio role. You talked about being able to sort of continue doing it, and perhaps a bit of writing in the mix. But you're a goals person. That's very clear. Are there other goals that you've got, both personally and professionally, moving forward that you're happy to share?
Oh yeah, look, the stuff with the board. Being on boards is something that I'm looking forward to getting more involved in. So, I'm going through that process now where, after changing jobs a few times and consolidating, I'm starting to think, well, what's 5 or 10 years look like? So, having lots of discussions with people who are in those positions and what are some of the skill sets that I need to continue to work on to be able to move towards that. So, that's where I am at the moment, and just being able to, talk about investing. And one of the things you and I were speaking just when we first met, and you talked about investing your time and your money, but also into yourself. And I've, that's paid huge dividends for me. Just the ability to invest in yourself, whether that's doing courses, whether that's speaking with people, whether that's, this sort of quest of continuous improvement. That's one thing I'm just so strong in, that you just never stop learning.
Yeah.
And, I'm still, I just finished a course recently. It was a really good one, talking about resilience and being able to, what that looks like, and how you can teach it to individuals and also to companies in terms of, what makes a resilient company, and how can you safeguard against it, and how can you, what are some of the key inputs that give you the resilience to be able to withstand some of the things that get thrown at you. So,
what are they? Because any sustainable success, which normally takes 15 years plus, if you look at all, and I study this, I love the study of success, and time again it comes back to, you can have instant success that doesn't last very long, but the sustainable sports teams, musicians, bands, companies, corporations, governments, all take that amount of time, and it's all that resilience, that persistence, the patience.
Yep. So some of the things that I think are really important is, one is companies that the workers whose values line up with the companies. That's so important. And even with personal resilience, if you're doing something that is in a role, or the behaviours don't line up with your own values and your own beliefs, then it's hard. And when things get really hard, you're thinking, why am I doing this? Because it's just not right. Yeah. The other thing is support structures. Feeling like you're supported no matter what is really important. We all want to belong, and we all want to feel like we're valued and we're supported. And it's not just at work. It's around who's picking the kids up from school. What happens if there was a teacher's strike last week, and you've got so many dual income families, and people saying, well, who looks after the kids today when the teachers aren't turning up? And there was a great case study that I was looking at while I was doing this course, and they were looking at people who had really high stressful jobs, people like ambulance drivers and firefighters that were fighting bushfires. As they were driving to the bushfires to fight them, they weren't worried about a log falling on. They were worried about who's looking after the kids, who's going to pick, little Johnny up from daycare, because that's what's really important to them. So building support structures and fallback positions that that if something were to go wrong, this is how we could handle it. And because anxiety really is the fear of the unknown. What would happen if that happened? So some of those inputs, if you're able to build those things up, that takes a lot of weight off your shoulders, and you just know no matter what gets thrown at me, we'll be able to handle it. And that comes about through partners and families and close friends and your employers being able to support things.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's the important one, which is we've spoken about, the work-life balance of, the things that are important to you, whether it's my son's sports day or, my daughter was fortunate enough to get a merit in her year 12. So being able to go to Government House and be there and see that's a highlight.
Awesome.
But if you can't do that because you can't get time off work, well, what's the point? So that work-life balance and feeling like the things that are important that you can get to and you can do and you can enjoy, that also makes that job a really valuable one. And it's interesting in terms of retention. I think if you start to look at money is important, but you could pay people less but offer people more of that stuff. Tell you what, it's a pretty powerful thing when you, to be able to offer your employees to say that, that is so important. You go do that and enjoy it. So all those things, there's about 7 elements that are all touchstones, but they're the key ones. That if you have the alignment, both as an individual and with your organisation, that gives you a fair chance of having success. Yeah,
sort of taking on from your obvious interest in learning, some of the threads I'm picking up from what we've been talking about are that you're someone who not only is goal orientated, so you get an idea of where you want to be, but I think the next step from that is not being scared to approach people and ask the questions to learn from others that have gone before you. Is that? Am I right in saying that, mate?
Absolutely, and. Fortunate, I talked about having, a manager, Ian Gray, who was an older, wise guy, and I just got so much out of that. And also I've had lots of other different mentors along the way, and coincidentally or not, maybe it's the universe, just started doing that with some younger people who are just starting in their way in footy or in just coming out of uni, through friends of friends or being asked to do it. And I enjoyed enormously sitting down once every 4 or 5 weeks, having a coffee, talking about stuff they're doing, asking, the same questions that were asked to me. What does 5 years' time look like? What are you working on at the moment? What's your biggest struggle? What gives you grief? What do you enjoy? The things you enjoy, what career paths tie into that, all those type of questions. Now, I'm not giving them the answers. I'm just posing questions so that they start to think about, some of the things that could be important or what direction they may want to go in.
Yeah, and having the guts not to only ask the questions, but then identify the people they're going to get the answers from, and then have the courage to actually reach out to them or find someone who can reach out to them to actually have that conversation.
Yeah, and football was great. We learned so much from footy, and when I was coaching, I was coaching some forwards, and there were some of my players who grew up idolising blokes like Wayne Carey and Jonathan Brown, who had sort of finished their careers and they'd moved into the media.
Yep.
One of the things I started to sort of say to them, so what would you say if Jonathan Brown walked into the room now and you sat down and you had a half hour with him? What are some of the things you would ask him? Oh, this and that. And I said, well, what if I give you Jonathan Brown's phone number? Would you ring him up and organise a meeting? Oh, I'm not sure about that. Well, why not? Oh, I don't know. Well, so I was fortunate. I had built some relationships with some of those guys. So I said, look, I'll open the door. I'll ring a Wayne Carey or a Jonathan Brown, and I'll say, look, player X is going to give you a call. He really is keen to pick your brain because you are one of the best in the position that he plays. Yeah. Would you mind? And they said, no, that's fine. Tell him I'm waiting for the call. And then it's write the phone number down, hand it to the player. The player then has to organise a time. Often these guys are interstate. So, you ring up, chat to them, talk to them, meet them, prepare some of the stuff, what they're going to ask them. And what happens is, invariably, they become friends. And, these guys who are commentators, they're watching them play. So then they'll see something, they'll pick the phone up, they'll then, and they'll start this sort of mentor relationship. But go back 2 or 3 years and these young blokes are thinking, I couldn't dare ring these legends. But once you realise you can pick the phone up and the guy on the other end is actually flattered that someone wants to pick his brain, and those relationships I think are important, and it's like the cycle of life. Those young players who then go on to have successful careers, their phone rings at the end of their careers because the next wave of young players are ringing them and saying, look, can I sit down and have a coffee? Yeah. Now, what they're going to do is say, absolutely, because of the enrichment that they got through the experience, they're just going to pass it on. So it's a great sort of circle of success.
Yeah, it is. It's almost sad in a lot of ways that and not enough of that applies in the world outside sport. Yeah. Because that wisdom being passed on is what makes or breaks civilizations in actual fact.
And it's funny as well because, I had this moment where I've been fortunate to sit down with a couple of people and I'm asking questions and I thought to myself, I looked across at the person I was chatting with and I thought, you know what? I've got 3 daughters at the moment. They're 18, 22 and 24. And I had this thought where I said, I'm not sure I've delved into their psyche as much as I'm, and probing and asking because it's just what dads do. Dads don't get serious all that much. So it's made me think a little bit about that. And I've sort of since have taken a much more proactive sort of involvement in what's 5 years look like? What are you doing? Yeah. And, my eldest daughter's been, she's put her uni degree on hold for a little while and she's gone off and travelled, which I've encouraged her to do. But I'm sort of sitting there, come on, you need to get back on this. And she's doing that. She's picking it back up. But, start to think about what that looks like and where you want to go and what you're going to do. And she's changed her course slightly to reflect her interest. And similarly, my 18-year-old, my youngest daughter, we spent, a good 6 months really pinpointing what courses that she really wanted to go for. And she did a fair bit of research and she's come back and she wants to be a midwife, which is, really exciting. And she put a lot of effort and she's got a real understanding of what that involves. And she's so excited about taking that on early next year. Yeah,
brilliant, mate. Mate, I'm going to change gear a little bit and go into, because I'm mindful of your time, go into what I call the ambush session. And it's a play on my nickname, obviously. Or the bushfire round, as I like to call it. And there's just a couple of questions that the listeners love to hear answers to. And the first of those is, what's your favourite quote and why?
My favourite quote. Winston Churchill once said, my best impromptu speeches I spend the longest time preparing for. and that's more about understanding that, there's moments and you have to prepare for them. And, whilst people just think, he just jumped up there and he said that, very rarely does that ever happen. It might, you might have some success at some stage and you'll jump up there and someone will put a microphone in front of you. But, you should have always dreamt about that success, and what's it look like. And the more vivid the vision is about what it's going to look like, what it's going to feel like, and then, and the more you think about that, then you start to add layers to it. So I'm a bit of a believer in that you should always be prepared for something. And like for every 1 minute you speak, you should probably spend 4 or 5 minutes in preparation. So if you're giving a half-hour talk, it's probably 2 or 3 hours worth of preparation that goes into it.
At least, yeah. That's very sage advice, mate. Mate, turning to the knowledge side of things again, is there a favourite book or a favourite podcast that you would suggest people jump into?
I like Freakonomics Radio, which is a podcast. And look, I'm not an economist at all, but I just love how everything can be brought back to that. So once again, it's, I sometimes think that areas that you're not strong in, you get the most enjoyment out of learning because you're learning so much more. Now, like I said, I don't know haven't sort of formally sort of been trained in economics, but I find myself really enjoying that. There's a book called Bounce by Matthew Syed, I think his name is. Now, he was a famous table tennis player. Yep. And basically, this has got a bit of a sporting connotation to it, but it's all to do with 10,000 hours of mastery. So basically, purposeful practice and being able to put time and energy into it. And if you can spend 10,000 hours doing anything, you can be the best in the world at it. So that's a really interesting one. Great dinner table conversation starter.
Yeah.
I enjoy that. And Malcolm Gladwell is another one. He
talks about 10,000 Hours as well.
He does, yeah. And he writes really interesting, thought-provoking books, and he's got a great podcast called Revisionist History, which I really enjoy listening
Love it
to.
too.
Apart from yours, of course.
I'll pay you later for that one, mate. No, awesome, mate. And I love Malcolm Gladwell's stuff. He really gets you to think, and he tells a great story. He wraps it into something that's really interesting.
Yeah, he's a storyteller. And that's the other thing that I love as well. And this is from coaching. When I was coaching, we spent ages trying to work out the best ways of imparting knowledge. That's basically what coaching is. How do I get what's in my head to you, or how do we get our tactics to you to be able to do? And the stickability of the way you tell the story is so important. And and I've read a couple of books about it. If you can make things memorable, people, it's like the the story about the bloke who goes into the bar in Brazil and a beautiful lady comes up to him and offers to buy him a drink, and he has a sip of the drink, and all of a sudden he wakes up, he's in a bath full of ice, and he's got a note in front of him that says, "Ring this number, we've just taken your kidney," and it's an urban myth, but that's about I don't know, the number of words that I just said there might be, I don't know, a couple of hundred words in that. They then, this is this book that I was reading, they then put, the farming techniques of outer Angola, and they talk about the aridness of the soil, and it was the same amount of words, but it was so boring and so gobbledygook that I couldn't repeat 10 words. So it's how to create something that is memorable. And Neil Craig, I talked about Neil as a coach. Yeah. We when we were playing footy, there's this one thing we talked about when we would distribute the ball, about when you got the ball, about turning your head both sides and being aware of what's around you. And we wanted to move laterally before we went forward. It was easy to get through the defence. Yep. He came up with the Amazonian dolphin.
Okay. So, peripheral vision.
What happened is when the Amazon River floods the rainforest, the dolphin has to swim, and it swims, and there's all these tree trunks and that are all underwater now, and the Amazonian dolphin is the only dolphin that can actually, it's got vertebrae or something that can turn its head and look around, because it has to dodge all these tree trunks. So we'd be out training, and we'd be in the middle of training and we'd be doing something, and a bloke would take the ball,
dolphin,
and Craigie would yell out, "Amazonian dolphin!" and instantly. So that story is 200 words long or more.
Love it.
And the story equates to what you have to do, a certain tactic, but it's 2 words to have everyone have the same picture in their mind.
Awesome. Very clever. Yeah, that's an awesome. Well, you're still telling that story now. How many years ago was that?
Yeah, over a decade ago. It's memorable.
Brilliant, mate. Awesome. Okay. The best and worst piece of investment advice you've received, and I'm not talking about shares or property. I'm talking about investment in life overall. What would they be?
I think the worst is listening to someone who's got a sure thing. Like I've over the journey, this share, it's going to be great. I remember this is just before the tech bubble burst. There was a company called VoiceNet. And I don't even know what it did, but I think it was you're able to talk to a computer and it was going to do something. And it was like 25 cents. And someone said to me, this is in January, by Easter, this is going to be $10, And you're thinking, and all of a sudden, the numbers in your head, am I buying enough? What's this going to mean to me? It's going to change my life. And I reckon that must happen. If you buy shares and you move in those circles, you're getting tips all the time. And look, 1 in 20 might happen, but the vast majority, if ever something sounds too good to be true, it generally is.
Yep.
And that's something that I generally live by.
Yep.
So that's the worst piece of advice.
Yep.
Probably the best, and this has come about probably more recently, is the value of compounding.
Yes.
With my daughters now, trying to teach them to start sort of fossiling money away, and even a couple of years back that you were able to contribute $500 into your super, and the government would match. They put $200 or $300 in there. At 20 years of age, $500. If I was giving a birthday gift, I might do that. that is at the end of the chain in 30 or 40 years' time, that becomes a really nice present.
Massive,
I reckon.
mate.
So
massive.
that, I'm at the stage now where, I've had children go through private school, so that's been a fairly large impost over the last, 5 or 6 or 7 years.
Yeah.
Well, I'm looking at maybe borrowing some money and buying, some value-based shares and using it as an enforced saving. So I'll cop the repayments and all that, and all the dividends and all the capital growth just gets reinvested, and just use that as, I've got a house, of course, which is probably most people's major investment. So just looking at something in the stock market, like I said, it's an enforced savings that I can afford to give up the cash flow. But hopefully we'll get some reasonable growth, and if you can do that for 10 years, I think there's probably a nest egg at the end of it. And we've all got super, of course, which we just try and forget about.
Exactly.
And hope it just does its work.
Mate, just to bring it to a close then, if you were talking to maybe one of your own kids or someone who's just leaving school, what would you suggest they invest their time, their energy and money into to get to freedom under their terms long term?
I would always say invest in yourself, and just understand what that looks like. And I would say, one of the things I didn't do, because I played football, and football was probably 10 months of the year, I did very little travel. Right. And I've seen, I've referred to my oldest daughter, who's 22. She, for the last 18 months, she spent a couple of months in South Africa studying she's doing a science degree, which she got an unbelievable opportunity to do that. Yeah. She then went and worked and travelled, and she is just a different person, because of the nature of being a bit more worldly and having to fend for yourself. And
that resilience comes in because you've got to fend for yourself.
And being, I remember she rang me from, I think she landed in Cape Town, and she was with one other, 19-year-old girl or something, a 20-year-old at the time, and saying, "Dad, I'm scared, it's a big bad city, Cape Town." They had to be there for 36 hours before they went out into the, into the jungle where they were studying. So things like that give you a sense of this is a big world and you can do lots of things in it. So, when I say invest in yourself, go do things, experience things, try things, and see how it works. And don't be afraid to ask people for help and give you advice. Now, I'm not saying you take on everything that everyone says, but if you know someone pretty well, or you've followed someone that you think's got a really good track record, and you ask them for some advice, generally they give it up pretty freely. And when you invest in yourself, you're sort of building something. And if you invest in something that can, whether it's an investment or something, there's a chance that it can fall over. Money invested in yourself is generally well spent, and you never lose on that. Yeah,
spot on, mate. No, that's absolutely awesome, mate. God, really appreciate you spending some time with me today. For those who want to hear more about Mark, and you live in and around South Australia, or even I think you can get 5AA on pretty much anywhere now. Yeah. Mark's on in the afternoons between 3 and 7, I think, is it?
Well, they were 4 and 6 now. 4 and 6. So $13.95, 5AA. I'd love to get some listeners from around the world. That'd be nice.
Would be awesome.
We talk all sports, so
all good stuff.
It's been an absolute pleasure, Bushy. And as I said, I've enjoyed listening to the wide and varied people that you speak to, and just hope that people have enjoyed sitting down and listening today.
There's absolute gold there. Appreciate your time, Mark.
Thanks.
Thanks, mate. Well, freedom fighters, how good was that? To get a summary of all this investment gold in the show notes, just email me on hello@khgroup.com.au. That's HELLO@khgroup.com.au. Or check us out at www.bushymartin.com.au/get invested. I look forward to joining you next week for another episode of the Get Invested podcast. So thanks for listening, and as always, dream as if you live forever and live as if you'll die